That's Harrell Fletcher, Molly Sherman, and Nolan Calisch are Portland-based artists that have come to work with us here in UC Santa Cruz, and we're doing the Collective Museum. We talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago when John Weber was on the show, and he just touched upon what's happening, and is a whole lot happening, actually. There's walking tours, there's a huge party that's happening tomorrow, and we're here to talk about it. So Thursday, February 11th, at the Mary Porter Cessnon Art Gallery in Porter College at 4 p.m., the public doors and windows are open for conversation. And you will be joined with Lydia Matthews, who is you want to tell us about it, Rachel?
Sure. Lydia Matthews is joining us. She's from Parsons College, and she is a curator and researcher of social practice art, which is really the kind of art, or socially collaborative art, which is the kind of practice that Harrell, Molly, and Nolan have. She's going to be here in conversation with them tomorrow at 4 p.m. It's actually at the Digital Arts Research Center, room 108, so the Dark Lab. And then at 5, we'll be moving over to the Cessnon for a tandem exhibition that goes with the Collective Museum, and the party starts at 5. There'll be music and food.
Yeah. And then Friday, February 12th, and Saturday, February 13th at 9 a.m., if you come to the Dark, you'll be able to go on a walking tour of this collective museum. So would one of you mind just giving us a quick, how are you pitching the collective museum? Harrell, would you mind?
Sure. Yeah, so the Collective Museum is a set of 50 sites that have been selected by 50 people who have direct connections to the UC Santa Cruz campus, faculty, staff, students, alumni. And so each of those people we met over the course of the last year or two, and worked with them for them to select a site that was significant to them on the campus, but could be a very sort of personal site, or something occurred there that might have been ephemeral. And so they're identifying those spots, and then we've made signage that goes in relationship to the actual locations, as well as 5 walls that are being used in different buildings around the campus that have exhibitions on them about those 50 sites told by those 50 people.
And I believe there's one here in Merrill in the Baobab. Is that
yes, there's an exhibition wall there. There's actually also right next door at the Cantu Queer Center is one of the signs, so hopefully you've seen it.
Excellent. Okay, so let me just ask you, for somebody who thinks of museum as a big ivory kind of space where you can't touch anything, how is this a museum and not just a tour? Do you want to, yeah. Molly? Okay.
Sure. So we've reimagined the whole campus as a museum, but our museum does not have walls, right? It doesn't have the building, the space that a typical museum does, but we've really utilized museum platforms. So the signage, museum catalog, exhibition walls, walking tour, a website that links all of those together, and then highlighting significant sites on campus. So instead of collecting objects, we've collected these stories from people on campus and highlighted those, similar to how you frame artwork in a museum. We're framing stories.
And is this something that you three have done in the past? Is this not the first time?
We've worked in the past on projects together that have, one of which that was very related to museums, but this is a very site-specific project to UC Santa Cruz. So we have never done this project anywhere else.
We're the lucky recipients.
You are the lucky recipients.
And how has it been working with UCSC and all of the different professors? 50 sites. You must have run across a lot of people.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
Nolan Calisch.
Yeah, we've talked to a whole range of people, and really, the museum represents and reflects that whole spectrum of people and interests and specific knowledge and research that's happened here, and it's really emphasizes an interdisciplinary ethic that seems to be in the campus.
Which is hard in academia in general, to have an interdisciplinary space. It's hard for the bureaucracy to be that way, but it seems like UCSC is really trying hard to break that and move, starting with the DARC, the Digital Arts Research Center, and the Digital Arts and New Media program, which I believe was the first interdisciplinary program on campus. The intention was to be able to go anywhere and bring that back into the art practice. And so the DARC is just the space that we get to play in now. It was in Porter College. And so I just find this an amazingly fascinating way of looking at museum and Museum 2.0. We have our Nina Simon, who's the director of the Museum of Art and History here in Santa Cruz, and she wrote a book called Museum 2.0, and the changing our ways of thinking about the museum, and this is just a huge movement in that same direction. Have you had any interaction with the museum downtown?
I'm definitely aware of it, and I think I've met Nina in the past, but we haven't worked with her on this particular project. I would love to be able to chat with her and see what she thought, because I think, there's definitely a lot of connections between what we're doing and what they're doing there at the museum.
And Harrell Fletcher, who is speaking, is here with Portland-based artists Molly Sherman and Nolan Calisch. Portland, to me, seems like a highly collaborative, interdisciplinary city. Do you think that that's true?
Well, so I run an MFA program at Portland State University that specifically focuses on art and social practice. And so within that program, there is a huge emphasis on collaboration and participation. Unlike a more traditional MFA program that's more about making individual works in a studio, in a solo way, we're really interested in all kinds of different collaborations. And so I think that, definitely there in the program and the projects that students and alumni are doing from that program are really working with new ideas about how collaboration can function and the benefits of that.
And Harrell, also, for some people listening in, our dear audience may think of how is social practice and art practice. Would you mind just talking about that for a moment? I know it's obviously it's something you think about all the time, but in contemporary art, some would argue that if it's not socially based, site-specific, that it's not really relevant art today. What do you think about that?
I think that the thing that's great about art is that it's actually a really open space for all kinds of different kinds of activities. So there's room for people to do object-based studio art, and there's obviously lots of museums and galleries that are set up for that. And I think that that's probably still the sort of dominant mode that most artists are working in. But there's been lots of historical precedents that we look at where artists have decided to work in other ways, where they're not so concerned about making objects that could potentially be sold and acquired by a museum, but instead are working on project-based works that in the end, the objects are much more specifically determined by the context and the participation and the nature of that place. So it's a different way of working, but I think it's one way of explaining it, I think, is to maybe think about the difference between Hollywood film and independent documentary, and that in some ways the social practice approach is more similar to documentary. It's about real things, and there's collaborative elements, and there's also the process is not determined in advance. You don't know what you're going to be running into. And I think for me that's a really exciting element of it, because I get to sort of learn throughout the entire experience. And it's not like finished in advance and then shown. It's like we're experiencing it all together. And this is a great example because the Institute has been so integral to this project, and Rachel and John, that we've really kind of collaborated with them as well. And as we arrive here today, we just all arrived this morning from Portland, we're going to be really experiencing it for the first time, walking around and seeing all 50 sites and going to the museum, to the gallery, the Cessnon, and seeing the exhibition, which we didn't install ourselves. So we get to, in some ways, be the audience to the project that we created.
And Rachel Nelson, you're also a part of the Institute of Art and Science that Harrell was just referring to. This is your first major exhibition of the Institute.
That's right. The Institute has been developed on campus really over many, many years. People have desired to build some sort of museum and exhibition space on campus. The Institute also arises out of the idea that perhaps what this campus needs is not a straight museum, not a collecting museum, but something that reflects the interdisciplinary nature of the campus, but that has kind of a public-facing idea. So we were really happy to be able to work with Harrell, Molly, and Nolan to kind of envision what one example of this could look like, how the Institute could work on the campus and embrace kind of the whole campus and become an exhibition space that involves both the public and the campus community.
And Rachel, you're also the co-curator of the space in the Cessnon Gallery.
Yes, and the whole project. I think that the Cessnon exhibition is this great little exhibition that provides a really interesting glance at the entire museum, but the campus itself is really the museum, right? So this is just, we've asked students in different art classes, in D. Hibbert Jones' class and A. Lori Palmer's art class, along with some other art students, to make sculptures representing each of the 50 sites. The artists gave them very short little descriptions of the sites, and it's amazing what the students have come up with. Oh. So, yeah.
And that will all be available for the public to see. This is, I believe, free and open to the public?
Yes, definitely.
And you can go to the ias.ucsc.edu to get all the information. You can also go to the Cessnon Gallery information there. And again, we want to just make sure everybody understands that tomorrow is the grand opening of this exhibition. It starts at 4 p.m. This is Thursday, February 11th, at the Dark Building in room 108, and there'll be a conversation with Lydia Matthews. And then everyone is going to take a lovely walk through the woods over to the Cessnon Gallery, the Mary Porter Cessnon Gallery, where the opening reception begins at 5 o'clock and runs until 7. And then Friday morning, February 12th, and Saturday morning, February 13th at 9 a.m., you can go to the front of the Dark Building and have a walking tour with the artists and the co-creators, co-curators, and of course, co-creators. It's a collaborative experience.
And many of the participants in the project, so many of the site contributors, for instance, professors that have suggested a space, students that have suggested spaces, are going to be joining us on the walk, and we'll be talking at the sites along the way.
Oh, wonderful. So there seems like so much coordination that has to go on with so many people. How's it been for you, Rachel?
It's been really, really interesting. I think that in some ways, I know that I've said this to the artists before, that we approached the artists right when the Institute was really getting going. This is the first major exhibition we've launched. We do lasers and other public events. But one of the things that they did was they taught us how to really work on the campus, how to work with all these people, how to collaborate across the campus, and how to get things done. And so in many ways that they've imagined the Institute into being already. So.
Oh, how wonderful. And then how did you find Harrell Fletcher and Molly Sherman and Nolan Calisch?
Well, I think Harrell should tell you about his connection to UCSC.
Yeah, so I actually did the apprenticeship program, the Farm and Garden apprenticeship program, in 1996, 2 years after I got my MFA in Oakland. I had become really interested in urban gardening originally, and then wound up learning about the apprenticeship and applying for that and getting in and living on a tent for 6 months on the campus back in 96, having an amazing experience, probably the best educational experience I ever had doing that program. And afterwards worked on farms, and I think also the experience of learning about farming and running a CSA and a farm stand and all of those kinds, and working cooperatively with all of the other apprentices and the staff really affected my art practice. And in a lot of ways, what I've done with my own personal practice is that I've adapted a lot of the things that I learned in farming and here in particular on the campus to work within an art context. And so it got me to think about how the work is distributed and viewed, and how you can work in collaborative, cooperative ways to make work that's really relevant and site-specific, based a lot on what I had experienced at the Farm and Garden Apprenticeship.
Oh, that's wonderful. Harrell Fletcher and Molly Sherman and Nolan Calisch, they are Portland-based artists that have been collaborating with quite a few people, but specifically with Rachel Nelson, who is... you're the director of the Institute? No, John Weber is the director, and you...
I'm the other person at the Institute of the Arts and Sciences.
She is the other major half of the ias.ucsc.edu. You can go there and get all the information. And what a tremendous gift you've given us to think about the campus as a museum space. And I believe there's a beautiful book that's available that has all of the... John Weber had brought that. He had just gotten it hot off the press when he was here in the studio.
Yes, we have... Harold really introduced us to Nolan and Molly, and they have these amazing skill sets. But Molly Sherman has worked in book design for a long time, so was able to bring together in an amazingly short amount of time a really beautiful catalog for the project.
And I can attest to that. It is a beautifully designed book. Thank you, Molly. Thank you all. Thanks for listening. Thank you, dear audience. Thank you, Vanya Benavides, for live tweeting. Thanks to all the artists. Today was just amazing, and I hope you all are going to stay tuned and listen to Ramblin' Round. Before that, we're going to hear a little bit more of Barry Phillips and Solmaz Adeli. Have a great day.